thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitnie Wiley, and we are here talking all things leadership. It's Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, and today we are talking about failure. Failure. You're a failure, Robert.
I would hope so.
I love it. Right? Right. And usually when someone says you're a failure, people are offended, but we're going to suggest that you not be offended. Not only that you not be offended, that you be grateful for the opportunities that you've had to fail, that you embrace that, and then you turn it around and do exactly what it is that you want to do with it, right? So Thomas Edison is credited with the saying, I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work, right? And I walk around, I think people think I'm crazy. I actually say there is no failure. Either you win or you learn. Either you win or you learn. I was corrected last week. I was on a webinar with a network of people that I am doing some business with, and we're doing some mindset stuff and talking about failure. And I said, I don't really believe there's failure. Either you win or you learn. And so I was not disabused of that notion, but I certainly get the point that was being made, which is not to run away from failure, right? Not to be ashamed if you fail at something. And technically there is failure. The definition is about not getting or achieving an outcome that you've desired. And so in that respect, technically, yes, there is failure. What I mean by it is that as long as you don't quit right then, as long as you keep trying, as long as you learn something in the process, right? And we'll apply this to your journey as a leader, the way you interact with people. I'll share a story or two from some mistakes that I have made as a leader and how I've taken that, turned it around. So first of all, it's a mindset, and you get to decide whether or not you failed by quitting, or you've temporarily not gotten the outcome that you've wanted, and you learn something, you take what you learned, you apply it, and you keep going 10,000 times until you get what it is you want. What say you, Robert?
I agree. I think that when we talk about failure, there are certain levels of failure. Now, if we're talking about a mistake or a failure that is dangerous because it can cost somebody their life, that's different. But we're talking about as you're growing, as you're learning, as you're learning a new skill, as you're growing your leadership, as you're working with your team, failures are stepping stones that are paving the way to success. If you're looking at them as ways to learn. I don't know anybody that picked up a violin, sat at the piano, picked up a guitar, picked up a tennis racket, and automatically was perfect at it. And here's the thing. And I often tell this to people that are frustrated about their lack of progress or they trying to be perfect. And I said, if you came out of the womb walking, the very first time you fell down, you wouldn't know how to get up. All of those failures when you're a kid, a baby learning they teach you how to stand up, how to balance yourself. They build strength in you. And that's what failures should do for you and your leadership.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up as an example, because I think if we were to go back to that time of learning to crawl, learning to walk, learning to read, write, do arithmetic, all of the things that we learn to do as children, right? And we had a cheering section behind us every time we tried something and we failed. There was somebody there cheering us on, and somewhere along the way, the cheering stops and it becomes an expectation that somehow all of a sudden we're supposed to know exactly how to do something, that we start attaching the shoulds to the things that we're doing. And I'm going to say now, you've got to stop shooting all over yourself. Just stop it.
You beat me to that one.
You've got to stop it. The more you say the way something should be, right, the more you will, take on the identity of being a failure. And so you're not a failure. You've taken actions that have failed, right? And that's okay. Embrace that. Be good with that. Seek that. There's the story of the founder of Spanx, Sarah Blakely, right? And she talks about how her father, instilled in her this notion that she should be out failing every day. The more you fail, the more you succeed. And you probably heard fail fast, fail often, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how you get to success. That's how you learn the lessons of life, of leadership and relationships, right? I don't know anyone who's been in any relationship as a parent, as a child, as a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, sister, brother, friend, whatever, that has gotten it perfectly the very first time. And so we are constantly making mistakes, having failures, and our job simply is to learn from it and then try it a different way. And of course, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And so if you think that you can just keep doing the same thing over and over again and somehow it's going to be different, you're sadly mistaken. And as someone who came along as someone who loves math and problem solving, right? I really embrace that. And it's feedback, right? And we talk about that a lot here. It's just feedback. And if you reframe it, embrace it, and then reframe it, this is just an opportunity to learn. Things get better and you can succeed. And what happens, I've talked about this concept before, the DIF, right? The duration, intensity, and frequency, is that the duration between the times that you're making mistakes starts to expand. It doesn't happen as often, right? Because you have put in the time and the energy. You talked about playing the piano or an instrument or sport. You start honing those skills, the muscle memory, the recall, and it becomes easier and easier, so that the next time when you play a new piece, you won't play it perfectly the first time, but you won't stumble over it the way you did when you first learn the instrument, right? Or you first learn to serve. And then you're just tweaking things to get it to be better and better.
Absolutely. And better. I'm going to close the shades here because the sun is moving across the sky here, and it's
how dare the sun move,
illuminating me in an odd way.
Oh, you're illuminated. Woo!
But no, I think you're right. And there's a couple of things at play, I believe. And I think that now we live in a society where the notion of perfection is really coveted. And there is no perfection, where people aren't allowed to make mistakes. And if you make a mistake, that is it, you're done. But mistakes are what help you. They help build character. Hopefully, they help you build character. They help you learn things. They help propel you from point A to point B. And I always think about this when I was because I went to music school and I was studying to be a musician. And one of my courses was orchestration. I had to orchestrate for a full symphonic band. And I remember the professor saying, okay, and he was also the conductor of the symphonic band. And he was like, okay, well, each instrument has a range. There's a possible range that each instrument can play. And he was like, if you're writing for this, don't write in this range because they can't. And I was like, well, the instrument can go in that range. I'm going to do it anyway, of course. And I took a piece that was a Debussy piece, and I orchestrated it. And they struggled. And it sounded terrible. But I have to and it was embarrassing because I was conducting them and it was just awful. The very next year, they tapped me to orchestrate for a show. I didn't make that mistake again. I knew who I was dealing with. I knew because it wasn't that the orchestration was bad. They didn't have the capacity.
Right.
They weren't professional musicians. But the second time around, I said, okay, I'm going to learn from that experience, and orchestrated a bunch of tunes that were fantastic because I learned from that terrible experience, that terrible, embarrassing experience. I could have just said, you know what, I'm going to quit, or I'm never going to show my face. There was a little bit of that. For maybe a week, I avoided talking to anyone, but I got over it and I learned from it. And that's what you should be able to do, because that's how you grow.
Something you said there was, I think, really key is you took some time. Maybe it took a week, a couple of days, whatever it was. And it's okay to take time to process what's happened. And a lot of times we don't give ourselves permission to actually process what we've gone through. And it makes it more difficult to find the nuggets, to find the opportunities to learn if you don't take some time to process. Or particularly if you decide you're just going to pretend like it didn't happen. I'm just going to go over here and start my life all over again and act like that didn't happen. And I will share that in the context of my education. So my education is circuitous to be, I would say, very kind. To be kind, I'll call it that. So, I started as a pretty headstrong. I was a headstrong kid, and in case you can't figure that out, and I decided that I did not like school. I did not like high school. We had moved around quite a bit. And when I landed at the last high school I went to, I was very unhappy. To the degree that I enjoyed school was the last school I was at is where the boyfriend I had was. I was doing really well. And my parents bought a house from my grandmother. My grandmother had the house that my grandfather had built, and she moved somewhere else. And so my parents bought that house, and we moved back to the area that I lived in as a young kid. And I wasn't interested in going, right? Because I built this life somewhere else. And so once I got to the new high school, I was like, I had two choices, right? I could either rebel and not do school, or I could get out really quickly. And so I learned that I could graduate early in 3 years. And I can guarantee you pretty much from the first day I stepped foot on that campus, I was like full steam ahead. I was graduating in 3 years. And my father kept saying, it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. Don't do it. You're not ready. You're not mature enough. You're not ready, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I graduated when I was 16. I'll just own this right now as I tell the story. My dad was right.
Oh, you're making my stomach hurt.
My dad was right. And this is how it manifested itself. So I graduated early. I had applied to college one place. And my parents' only real like request of my sister and I. I have two sisters and a brother, but the other two are older. And so my younger sister and I, two requests that we graduate from high school and we graduate without children. And so they didn't ask a lot, right? And so I was like, well, I could deliver that for sure. And so I set about to do this. And somewhere along the way, I was like, school's not horrid. I'll continue. I'll go to college. I applied to one college. I got in. My father didn't like that choice of college. He's like, you should go to UC Berkeley. And I was like, I'm going to go anywhere but UC Berkeley. I had designed somewhere in particular, but I didn't really think I could get in. And this whole concept of failure, I did not want to apply and not get in. So I didn't apply. I applied the one place I was pretty certain I would get in. I went there for a semester. I hated it. It was I'll just say it was in San Francisco. It's cold and foggy in San Francisco. I didn't like it. And I transferred somewhere else. There's some other parts of the story. I'll save that for another time. I transferred to another university. And let's just say that didn't work out. I ended up coming back home and starting from scratch. And my parents were like, either get a job or go to school. I didn't want to work. So I went back to school, started at a community college, did 2 years, and then transferred to UC Berkeley, which is where my father told me to go in the first place. So I went to Berkeley. I'm a transfer student. I'm 2 years in, but the courses didn't quite match up. And so while technically I was a junior, when I went there, I still had some courses that were, under division courses, and it was all mixed up. It did not work out well. I eventually, after the first year, got dismissed from Berkeley. And by then I met the man who would become my first husband and blah, 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 blah. And I held that in as failure for the longest time. I didn't tell anybody, right? If you were not super close to me, you had no idea. Eventually, I applied to get back in. They let me back in. I didn't finish. I'm like one course to this day, still one course short of graduating with a degree in applied mathematics from UC Berkeley. And I say all this to say, and the first time I shared this story outside of my family, I actually got a standing ovation. I was speaking somewhere and got a standing ovation because I had not only owned it, but I kept moving forward anyway, right? I went to law school. I went to law school without an undergraduate degree. I graduated second in my class in law school. So, right, there are all kinds of ways to keep moving forward, but you have to own what's happened. You have to take responsibility for what's happened. And then you have to make steps that keep moving you forward. So someone could say, well, you failed at studying applied mathematics. And while that may be technically true, I do have a bachelor's degree, my master's, a JD, and I didn't let any of that stop me ultimately from doing the things that I wanted to do. And in the process, right, in between the time when I was dismissed from Berkeley and ultimately went back to school and got my bachelor's degree and my master's studying leadership, right, I had some life experiences that allowed me to learn about leadership on the ground. And one of my very first experiences was when I had to, I'll say, let someone go. Right. I wasn't really in a position where they worked for me and I had to fire them. We were really on the same level in the organization. But the people who ran the organization left the responsibility to me to let this person go. And all I can say is what I learned in that experience actually helped me in the first time I had to fire somebody who was a direct report. And if I hadn't had those experiences, right, I don't think I would be where I am today. And so the bottom line is you can't let what happens to you keep you from moving forward. And the way you do that is to stay in touch with, in tune with what it is you want and where it is you're going.
Absolutely. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing. I knew some of that. I knew a lot of that, but I didn't know some of the.
I always share just a little bit more every time, right? One of these days, somebody's going to know the full story of Whitney.
You put a little extra seasoning on it this time. There. Oh, okay. That's where that came from. Okay, good. Yeah, it's all about context. It's all about context. It's all how you look at it, and it's all about what success is to you, not what it is to other people. I've had a lot of people that, I don't want to say a lot of people, had several people that would say that I failed at some things, but I don't see those things as failures. I see those things as opportunities to alert me to maybe something I didn't like. Maybe
it's feedback, right?
It's feedback. It was teaching me something else. Now, that doesn't say that when those things happen, I'm not going to lie and say that when those things happen, I'm not disappointed, because many times I've been disappointed because I had expectations. But after some time, and this is why when you said, feel your feelings when you have a quote unquote failure, it allows you to process it, and it allows you to look at it differently. It allows you to see what your next steps are going to be. I came out of not similar to you, because I can't top that story, but I came out of.
It's not a competition.
I can't. I mean, even if it was, I wouldn't be able to top that. That's too. I can't go near that. But I came out of college a musician, and I was a professional musician, but I had to make some adjustments, because being a professional musician is not being a rock star. It's different. You got to work. It's a grind. And you have to make ends meet. You don't have any insurance. You got to do a whole lot of stuff. But along the way, I learned lessons. I led bands, and that you don't think it correlates to on the job, but yes, it does. We talked about that a little bit last week, that you'll learn certain things and you'll be like, oh, I can use that thing.
Yes.
That I learned during this other thing that I never thought that I would use again. How to talk to people, I hate to say this, how to give corrective action. I've had to do that in my music career. I've had to give corrective action. So as a manager, when I was a manager, I could actually say, okay, I've had tons of practice giving corrective action. I've had tons of practice rehearsing things, public speaking. That's when I became a trainer and would do lots of presentations, I looked at those things as performances. And so all my years on stage translated to very dynamic presentations. And people would always, how did you get so good? I've had years of practice. I used to stink, but I was able to take those lessons that I learned on stage and bring them to the boardroom or bring them to the classroom, and be able to have those dynamic presentations. It helped me. When your audience you're losing the audience. When you're on stage, you learn that. I was able to bring that same type of awareness to the boardroom. Ask a question, get people back, do something dynamic, do something exciting. So these are all lessons that you can learn as you were quote unquote failing at something.
Yeah, I think that we have this notion that things are supposed to be easy, right? And in America, anyway, and I know that there's different concepts around the world, but in America, we are entitled to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, or we are entitled to life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness, right? And I think somewhere that gets translated to we're entitled to be happy. And our definition of being happy is getting everything we want now, right? And therefore, if you don't get everything that you want now, there's a problem. And I love the point you made, which is ultimately you have to define success for yourself. What does that mean? Um, I could have gone on and studied mathematics, applied mathematics, gotten a job in what I don't know, which was part of the reason that I struggled so. I had no idea what I was doing with it. I loved math to this day. I still love math. But the why, there wasn't a deep, abiding why for the purpose of what I was going to do with that. Right. And so when we are thinking that it has to be a certain way, or we're doing it for other people, that success is defined by Madison Avenue or, our friends, our family, our parents, that we're trying to keep up with other people rather than defining success in a way that works for us. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to tell you what success is to me. And this is something that I say to myself every day, as well as I listen to it. So I have an app, part of my morning routine. I have an app with all these affirmations and things. And I took some bits and pieces from different people and created what my definition of success is. And I would challenge you to create your own definition of success, particularly as it relates to your role as a leader. What does it mean for you to be a successful leader? How will you know that you're successful in this way? So that when you run up against obstacles, when you run up against challenges, when you fail, when you make a mistake, and we've talked in the past about, making mistakes with direct reports and others and not leading well. For me, the only way that I cannot succeed as a leader is to be out of alignment with my values and my purpose as a leader, right? And if I am in alignment with that and somehow I don't get the outcome that I want, that's okay. And I can make adjustments to do it a little differently. So for me, it's simple. It says, for me, true success is loving God, loving my family, loving my life, living my purpose, enjoying being present in and grateful for every moment. And if I am doing that, right, I am true to myself. And as long as I'm true to myself, things seem to work out just fine. It is when I am not in alignment with that I make choices, decisions, and things go left. Is that the phrase that things go left? And when things go left, the feedback is, right, you weren't in alignment with your values. You weren't aligned. Therefore, you're making choices and decisions that took you in a different direction. And so when I have had to deal with either direct reports or in particular, maybe they weren't my direct reports, but junior staff, being clear about what it is we are talking about, our interaction, what it is I want out of those experiences, not just for me, but the junior staff, right? And then being authentic in those communications and relationships allows me to sort of go with the flow. But I know that if the outcome doesn't turn out exactly the way I envisioned it, that it's okay. And I think that if we can get to a place where we accept that even in our pursuit of happiness doesn't mean that everything's going to turn out perfectly in this moment, that we can build the resilience that we need. Ultimately, that's the piece that helps us to move on, right? Is the resilience and the ability to sort of pick up and keep moving forward rather than getting caught in this didn't go well, woe is me, therefore I'm just going to go off in another direction. You can always use that to question whether or not you're on the right track, right? For me, mathematics wasn't my thing. As much as I loved math, I had to ask the question, is this really how you want to spend the rest of your life? Do you even know what it is you want to spend the rest of your life doing? And when I stopped to ask those questions rather than to keep moving down a path that I was struggling with because it wasn't really resonating with me, I was able to do the word of the year for 2020. And I want to shift to this in terms of sort of failure of 2020 and the pandemic, right, is that it's okay to pivot. It's okay to make a left turn or a right turn or to stop and question, am I on the right path? Is this really what I want to do? Is this the conversation that I want to have? And if we would stop and do that a little more often, rather than, again, trying to do things because it's what's important to other people or that's what success looks like for other people, I think we'll enjoy the process more and not be wrapped up in the failure piece and end up with some of the outcomes that we end up with, where violence is involved, right? Because people are frustrated or angry and upset because things are not going the way they wanted them to go. They feel like they are truly a failure and life is not working out for them. And it's not that life is not working out for you. Life is sharing something with you, and it's an opportunity to make some adjustments, to take the feedback and make some adjustments. And it's the same thing in your leadership. If you're having challenges with your staff, with your team, ask some questions. Be willing to ask some questions. What is your part in it? What is their part in it? What are the lessons that are happening in the midst of what's going on? What can you learn and how can you apply that moving forward?
I agree. I think that when you said resilience, I had been thinking about that for a while, but you said it before I could. Resilience is what's needed in order to learn from and to bounce back from your failures. I think we should start talking a little bit about how do you bounce back? I think one of the first things you need to do is don't deny your emotions, because if you do that, that's going to create another problem for yourself. So don't deny your emotions, feel your feelings. Like I said earlier, look at what actually happened, not what you think happened, what actually happened. Unfilter it. What actually happened?
Or what you think should have happened.
Or what you think should have happened. Right. So what actually happened in that situation? Then sit down with yourself and plan what your next steps are going to be.
Yeah.
How will you navigate this failure? And when you're doing that, what I like to do is look for the leverage point. Where do you have leverage? Where can you move forward? Where can you move the needle just a little bit to get yourself some momentum so you can start that snowball effect and move in the direction that you want to go to. I think those three things are really, really important. But I can't tell you the number of things that I was involved in and failed. Just incalculable. I mean, there's just so many things, but I learned lessons, and some of those things that I tried, I'm still doing. They stuck because I was able to try different things and learn from different things and carry them over. There are so many things that I've learned just playing a musical instrument that I can apply in other areas of my life. And you have to be willing to transfer those things. And sometimes when you try to transfer those things, they don't work. But that's okay too. Try something different. it's about experimentation a lot of times when you're trying something new. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I want to say this as it relates to leadership. Everyone you deal with is an individual, different personality, different needs. The order of their human needs are different, right? There are 6 human needs, and we have all 6 of them, but we have them in different orders and to different degrees. And it is incumbent upon you as a leader, me, Robert, all of us, right, to treat people as individuals, to understand who they are and what they need. And one of the probably biggest mistakes I feel like I had made early, I made 2 mistakes early in my leadership journey. One was that I thought it was all about me. Right. I thought being in charge, being the leader was about me and sort of my, sitting on a throne sort of thing. And then the other is to treat everybody the same rather than treating them as individuals. And it was in bumping up against failure, leading that way, that I was able to take a step back and say, well, this isn't working. Why isn't this working? What do I need to learn? And a lot of it had to do with how people were leading me that I didn't like, right? And as I started paying attention and observing what I didn't like about people that I was working under, I was like, oh, you do that. You do that too. This is a mirror of you. And the reason that you're bumping heads with people and you don't like it is because this is an opportunity and a mirror for you to see what it is you're doing and learn from that. And it has helped me tremendously and is what actually put me on the path to studying management and leadership. It is understanding how this is the case. So taking some personal experiences, extrapolating some lessons from that, and then it created in me a curiosity to want to learn more, which ultimately led me to St. Joseph's and meeting you and us being here. So, right, all the pieces had to be in place, and I have learned to embrace every single failure and every lesson that has come from those failures, because they have helped me to become the person that I am today, and someone who can help other people, to learn, grow, and become the best that they can be.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you brought up St. Joseph's, because it's very interesting when you look at, and we're not talking about this as part of the topic of this broadcast, but what I find interesting about that, we both made quote unquote wrong turns that brought us together. It's really interesting. I wasn't even going to go to St. Joe's. I was going to go someplace else. And
me either.
I was going to study something completely different, and then I started looking at, well, what do I really want to study, and why, and then I said, well, organizational development and leadership. That's what I do now, and it just makes total sense. And then we just ended up meeting because of that. The wrong turns ended up turning us right.
And that's the way it is, right? And there are no coincidences. There are no mistakes, and there are no coincidences. I think I've said this here before. The obstacles are the path.
Yes.
Right. And that's not mine. I think there's a book by that title. The obstacles are the path. And so this is our journey. And unlike out of high school, I applied to one college. When I went to law school, I applied to one law school because I knew that's where I could get in. I didn't have an undergraduate degree. It's not like there were thousands of law schools clamoring, saying, Whitnie, come go to law school here. You don't have a college degree. We need you. But there were options, and I did the research and found them. But when I went to graduate school, I went to USF to finish my undergraduate. I took what I had done at UC Berkeley and transferred it to USF, and completed my undergraduate degree there, organizational behavior and leadership. And when I made the decision to go to grad school, I applied to 3 schools. I got into all 3. I had choices, right? It was like the first time educationally, I had choices, and I was leaning somewhere else. And at the last minute, I made a pivot and decided St. Joe's. So who knows what would have happened if I'd gone a different way. I'm pretty sure I would not have met you. The other 2 that were in, I think, one of the best, educational teams I'd been a part of. I would not have met the 3 of you. You and I would not be in partnership now had that not happened. So embrace, the bottom line is embrace those challenges, the mistakes, the failures that you have, that either you're going to bust through them, right? You're going to go through, you're going to go over, you're going to go around, under, but you just keep going. It's only when you stop that failure is the end result, right? It's only when you quit. So keep moving, up, down, over, around, whatever it takes. If that's where you are determined to go, find a way. The obstacle is the path, and just keep moving. Final words.
Final words, ditto, right? Final word, ditto. What she said. No, I agree. I think that, really take a look at your mindset and really see how you are interpreting a quote unquote failure. Is it paralyzing? Do you think it's a failure because other people think it's a failure? What do you think? Figure out how you really feel about it, and then you can make a plan and move forward.
Absolutely. Cool. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us on this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. If you are bumping up against obstacles, failures, mistakes, what have you, and you want some help, mindset, helping to change your mindset, helping to get unstuck, right? Maybe you want to continue and you don't know where to go or how to make the next step. Why don't you reach out to either Robert or I, and we would be happy to have a conversation with you about how we may be of service to you and helping you move forward. And the same with your organization. If you've got some challenges in your organization, both of us are organizational development professionals. We would be happy to help you in that effort. If you've got a topic you would like for us to cover, right? We've got a list of a couple of things that we've got planned, but we welcome your input. We've taken input from viewers in the past. We would welcome your input, and we can include those in our rotation. We would love to hear from you. So again, thank you for joining us. We are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. And until next time, take care.